Hello and welcome to Haunted Montreal's Spooky Story Sessions. I'm your host, Holly Rhiannon, and today I'm going to tell you all about Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours Chapel. With over 200 documented ghost stories, Montreal is easily the most haunted city in Canada, if not all of North America. Haunted Montreal is dedicated to researching these paranormal tales, and our channel brings you new videos in both French and English every second Saturday. Today's episode examines Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours Chapel and the persistent rumors that the oldest church in the city is also the most haunted. But before we get into today's story, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button so you get notified every time we have a new tale to share. And hey, if you're already subscribed, a big thank you and welcome back. We're so happy to have you here. Now, without further ado, let's get spooky. The Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours Chapel is both the city's oldest and, if paranormal experts are to be believed, one of the most haunted locations in Old Montreal. Also known as the Sailors' Church, this quaint stone structure is topped with 3 statues, including the magnificent Lady of the Harbour, flanked by 2 angels of the Apocalypse. The church is shrouded in mystery. Not only are there the bodies of several nuns buried in the crypt, but it is also the location of Saint Marguerite Bourgeois' sacred remains, a miraculous statue, and a possibly haunted 1848 painting called Le Typhus by Théophile Hamel that depicts the gruesome impact of the Irish famine on the city. There are also several reports from tourists of having photographed either a man in a tuxedo or a priest from the outside of the church's stained glass windows. Some believe the ghost captured on film is none other than Famine priest Monsieur Godfrey, who suffered a terrible injury in the church hours before dying in the summer of 1847 while caring for Irish refugees. To understand the significance of the church, it's important, as always, to look at some history. The island of Tiohtià:ke is part of the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka, or Mohawk First Nation. As part of European colonization, a French Catholic organization called the Notre-Dame Society of Montreal for the Conversion of the Savage Peoples of New France, established a colony called Ville Marie on the island in 1642 when the Mohawk people were in the Southern Territory. It wasn't long before all-out war broke out between the French colonists and the Kanien'kehá:ka First Nation, which lasted until 1701. In 1652, colony leader Paul de Chaumédy, Sieur de Maisonneuve, visited his sister in France and invited her colleague, Marguerite Bourgeois, to join the colony as its first teacher. According to Bourgeois, "One morning when I was fully awake, a tall woman dressed in a robe as of white serge said to me clearly, 'Go, I will never forsake you,' and I knew that it was the Blessed Virgin, although I did not see her face." Being a devout Catholic, she decided to join the colony where she was tasked with educating French children and converting Indigenous children to Catholicism. While today her education might well be considered cultural genocide against Indigenous people, in the mid-1600s, Catholic doctrine was almost ubiquitous in France, and adherents believed that all non-Catholics were heathens in need of conversion. It was a dangerous time for colonists to leave the palisaded settlement, as the Kanien'kehá:ka First Nation wanted their territory back and were willing to fight for it. It was during this war that Marguerite Bourgeois had the idea for the church. In 1655, she rallied the colonists to build a chapel as a state of pilgrimage outside of the colony's palisade, despite the danger. Before long, enough stones and materials had been collected to lay the foundation. However, in 1657, due to a change in ecclesial jurisdiction in the colony, the new Sulpician leaders suspended construction work for several years. When the Notre-Dame Society of Montreal for the Conversion of the Savage Peoples of New France gifted her a stable to be used as a schoolhouse, Marguerite Bourgeois kept herself busy with indoctrinating her students with Catholic ideology, while also teaching them skills deemed useful for the colony. In 1658, she founded the Congregation de Notre-Dame, a religious community for women that was not cloistered, and which spent a considerable amount of time with education. They instructed not only the colony's children and les filles du roi, orphaned girls sent by the King of France to populate the colony, but also various Indigenous people, especially children. The congregation was directly associated with the Notre-Dame Society of Montreal, and the overall and feverish goal was to colonize and actively civilize the indigenous people who had lived there for thousands of years by converting them to Catholicism. These religious zealots believed that they were saviors, and mainstream history has largely recorded them in this manner to present day. In 1676, with the help of the new order of Sulpicians, Bourgeois established a small school for indigenous girls in a village located at the base of the mountain known as the Mountain Mission. Its effectiveness in evangelizing the students was seen as successful by the French. As a result, funding was granted to further her educational projects. Marguerite Bourgeois died in 1700, leaving a legacy of practical and religious education for French colonists and cultural genocide against indigenous peoples. Following her death, the mission she founded moved from its location on the mountain to join with the Sulpicians at the Sainthoud. For 20 years, the religious authorities continued their efforts to evangelize the children of the Nipissing, Kanien'kehá:ka, and Algonquin First Nations. The mission would then move to Oka in the area where Kanesatake exists today. In 1678, the Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours Chapel was finally completed after numerous setbacks. A statuette that Marguerite Bourgeois had acquired in France of Our Lady of Perpetual Help was placed in the church as a religious relic. The chapel would continue to serve the community until fire broke out in 1754, reducing it to a smoldering ruin. The colonists claimed a miracle when the statuette acquired by Marguerite Bourgeois was discovered in the ashes unscathed inside its reliquary. Just 6 years later, the city capitulated to British forces who saw the site of the ruins as an ideal location to construct a barracks. The Sulpician priests intervened and persuaded British authorities that the chapel be rebuilt instead. In 1771, a new church in the Norman Gothic style was erected on the foundations of the old ruins, and the miraculous reliquary and statuette were placed above the entrance on St. Paul Street. With the British in charge of new immigrants arriving from the United Kingdom, Irish, and Scots, Catholics soon began attending religious services in the church. In 1831, the little statuette went missing and was presumed stolen along with its jewel-encrusted reliquary, and was not discovered until 1844, when it was found in one of the attics of the mother house of the Congregation de Notre-Dame. Its reliquary was found in a dusty corner of the chapel 50 years later. It was only in 1988 that the statue was permanently returned to the chapel, now encased in protective glass. As the number of Irish immigrants rose dramatically, Sulpician authorities decided to build the new St. Patrick's Church, inaugurated in 1847. This was the same year that the Irish Famine devastated Montreal. Both Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours Chapel and St. Patrick's Church were instrumental in providing assistance for over 75,000 typhus-stricken Irish refugees. You can learn the shocking details by watching our Black Rock video listed somewhere up here. Tragedy occurred on July 11, 1847, when a priest named Monsieur Godfrey had a terrible accident after tending to the Irish refugees in fever sheds. According to the Annals of the Grey Nuns, on the 11th, Monsieur Godfrey, having to exercise his ministry at the convent, arrived in the evening, probably after returning from the sheds. A few of our sisters met him. He told them with his vivacious and joyous humor, "Courage, my dear sisters, the sufferings are short, but the reward is eternal." In wishing good night to the superior, whom he found very anxious and preoccupied with her patients, he said to her, "Take care to not kill yourself." It was 6:30 in the evening. He directed himself towards the church of Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours to be given the Holy Sacrament, which he wished to receive as the last rites. Reaching the third floor of the sacristy and wishing to open the door giving passage to a gallery, he forgot, perhaps, or he did not know, most probably, that we had gotten rid of this gallery, and since he had made a great effort to open this door, which we had taken care to nail shut sufficiently, he rushed into a drop of more than 30 feet high. We transported him to the Hôtel Dieu, where it was not long before he expired, and went to receive the palm of the good servants always ready to immolate themselves in the service of the Divine Master. At the time, Bishop Bourget contracted typhus during the course of his duties, and was nearing death. He prayed to the Virgin Mary for a divine intervention to save his life. He promised that, if spared, he would restore the church as a pilgrimage site, create a new statue to adorn the church, and commission a votive painting about the church's role during the famine. When the bishop survived the epidemic disease, he made good on his promises and commissioned Théophile Hamel to paint Le Typhus, which was installed on the ceiling above the main entrance to the chapel, where it can still be seen today. It depicts the bishop and 3 orders of nuns tending to the typhus-stricken Irish famine refugees. At least one American tourist believes the painting is haunted. Indeed, in late 2019, when looking up at the painting, she witnessed something incredible. The tourist stated, "In the painting, the typhus victim of the dead man with the child clinging to him suddenly opened his eyes and stared directly at me. I was shocked. I grabbed my phone to snap a photo, but when I looked up, his eyes were closed again. And no, I wasn't taking advantage of Canada's new legal marijuana laws, if that's what you were thinking." Many tourists have reported paranormal activity within the church and its vicinity. On July 2nd, 2014, another visitor attending a ghost tour took some strange photos of the church and later wrote, "While the tour guide was showing us around, I decided to capture moments and took pictures of the buildings and churches. One of the pictures was the Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours windows on the side of the building. I've shown the picture to my friends, and we were wondering if one of the stained glass on the side of the building had an image of a man. I have attached here the photo, and if you zoom in on the second window, you will see a man wearing a black tuxedo looking right back at the shooter. We just want to confirm if there really is an image of the man on the window." One paranormal expert believes the image is none other than the ghost of Monsieur Godfrey, and that far from wearing a tuxedo, it is his ripped collar in the image caused by his terrible plunge into the pews. Another point of interest is the chapel's maritime connection. It is also known as the Sailors' Church because God-fearing seafarers would pray for safe crossings, transatlantic or otherwise. Another of Bourget's promises was to install a statue of the Virgin Mary, and in 1848, Charles Dauphin's Star of the Sea was installed. This inspired a larger statue of the Lady of the Harbour on the rooftop in 1892. She faces the port flanked by 2 angels of the apocalypse holding trumpets. There's a fascinating Montreal legend about an apocalyptic and paranormal day when the Lady of the Harbour turned her back on the port, resulting in some serious tragedy. I'll direct you here, again, to our video about the Phantom Caleche. Several miniature ex-voto ships also hang from the chapel's ceiling, gifts from thankful seafarers over the years. Marguerite Bourgeois became Canada's first female saint when she was canonized on October 31st, 1982. The Halloween ceremony at Vatican City was presided by Pope John Paul II. On the 350th anniversary of Marguerite Bourgeois' arrival in Montreal in 2003, celebrations marked the occasion. 2 years later, the remains of the saint were placed in the left altar below the statue of Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours. A few weeks after that, the remains of devout recluse Jean Lebert were inserted into the east lateral wall of the chapel. Lebert is one of the city's most devout personalities from the New France era. On June 24, 1685, then 18-year-old Lebert took a simple vow of perpetual seclusion, chastity, and poverty. Once a recluse, she spent long periods of time below a church altar when not self-flagellating, sewing, or praying, right up until her death in 1714. Given her bizarre life of eternal seclusion and repentance, some paranormal experts believe that she too has returned as a spirit. Today, visitors of the Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours Chapel can enjoy exploring the church in quietude and examining the exceptional relics, architecture, and artworks. It costs nothing to enter. For a fee, however, guests can explore the Marguerite Bourgeois Museum to learn more of the history, climb up to the steeple for a panoramic view, and visit the creepy subterranean crypt. According to archaeologists, the bodies of several nuns lie buried beneath the crypt. Apparently, they were victims of an epidemic during the New France era and were buried below the first church. There is, of course, speculation that they too may haunt the chapel. With all of the chapel's storied history, statues, artworks, relics, and various human remains, it's no wonder that Montreal's oldest church, Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours, is also reputed to be its most haunted. Are you a Montreal resident or perhaps a tourist who has experienced something strange at Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours? If so, we would love to hear about it. As always, we want to know your thoughts about what could be going on. Thank you so much for stopping by. If this is your first video, I do hope that you'll stick around for more. We put videos out in both French and English every second Saturday. If you'd like to learn more about the organization founded by the talented Donovan King, it is all listed in the description down below, along with links to purchase tickets to in-person haunted storytelling tours. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We'll have a new video out in a couple weeks, but until then, stay spooky.